Huh?
Christian school.
Ready?
And I was right next to her. I was like,
Yes, we
Are we going? We're going. Okay. Chapter 11. Embolden questions. I am on page 76. Turn to page 76, please. Everybody there? Excellent. Would it make any difference if the apostles made up much of the story they recorded in the New Testament? How would it make a difference, Shauna?
well, I would think that they wouldn't, if they changed it, if they didn't put in the embarrassing facts, it wouldn't.
Okay. What else might be a problem with it, them making up that story? Yeah.
If we knew part of it was fake, then the rest of it would be in suspicion.
I'm sorry, what?
If we knew part of it was fake, then the rest of it would be in suspicion.
Yeah. If any part of it was fake, then there's some pretty crazy stuff in there, right? At least humanly speaking. Yeah.
If part of it was fake, our whole religion.
And here's the thing, and we're going to get to the resurrection. But the resurrection is the linchpin of Christianity. If the resurrection is true, it's all true. If the resurrection is false, it's all false. There's really no in between. Either Jesus is who he said he is or he's not. And we'll talk more about that when we get to the resurrection. What profitable advantage, if any, would the writers of the New Testament gain from an invented story? Particularly this invented story. Yeah, I mean, none. And even more than that, it got them only bad things, right? They didn't make money off of it. Nearly all of them were martyred, and all of them were persecuted for this story, for claiming this story is true. What are some arguments you can think of that confirm that the apostles didn't simply conjure up a make-believe story? We just mentioned one of them. They were all persecuted and most were martyred, including not just the 11, but also Paul and others. Yeah.
They could have easily left out facts that would have left them out of trouble.
Yeah.
They were basically kind of
Yeah, if it's not true, it is blasphemy, absolutely. And here they are in Jerusalem, in the same city as the people who crucified Jesus, and we're going to say he rose from the dead. What's going to happen to us? But they still told the story. Okay, equip 1. List the 10 reasons we know the New Testament writers told the truth. This is easy. Embarrassing personal details, embarrassing details and difficult sayings of Jesus. They left in demanding sayings of Jesus. They carefully distinguish Jesus' words from their own. They include events related to the resurrection that they would not have invented. More than 30 historically confirmed people in the New Testament include divergent details, challenge readers to check out the facts for themselves, describe miracles like other historical events, and then they abandoned their former lives, their long-held beliefs. These were all Jews, right? All of Jesus' followers were Jews. Jesus was a Jew. And now they're abandoning Judaism for what would become Christianity. And they kept that till their deaths. They went to their deaths proclaiming Christ. Number 2, explain how including embarrassing details about themselves implies that what the writers wrote is probably true. Yeah.
Writers tend to try to make themselves look better, not worse.
Yeah. There's a song by Bruce Springsteen called Glory Days. And it's about he and his buddies from high school talking about their glory days in high school and on the baseball field. And they exaggerate them. And that the last line is really good. That basically he says living in the past just leaves you with boring stories of glory days, which is interesting. So that's what you do, though, right? You embellish it to your benefit, not to your detriment. And so when inventing a story, especially one where you're trying to persuade someone, when you're trying to get someone to believe what you're saying, we present the best version of ourselves or of the story. When Carl Jung was a freshman, I think, they went to Calvin Crest. And I wish Carl was here to tell the story because he does a much better job of it. But he somehow, and I think he was wearing tennis shoes, stepped on a board with a nail. And the nail went through his foot, right? Yeah, like all the way through his foot.
Not
Or almost, not all the way through, but good chunk, yeah. And two seniors, Cam and Sam, picked him up and carried him to a place where he could get first aid, and it was pretty gruesome. And when Carl tells that story, and when he was a junior, he told that story to the class. You know it's true, right? Because how embarrassing that you step on a nail and two boys have to carry you to safety. And he talked about how he was not handling it well and he was freaking out, and he could have said, I was pushed onto that, or I took it like a man. I walked a half a mile to safety, but that's not the story that he tells. So it's true. You know that he's not making up a story. So number 3, explain how including difficult sayings of Jesus imply that the writers wrote what the writers wrote is probably true.
Why would you leave in embarrassing stuff about this supposed to be your hero and your savior?
And he said things that even the disciples were like, "What?" Hey, if I said this to you, okay, let's just say I'm saying this to you in class. If you don't eat my flesh or drink my blood, you have no part with me. You have no relationship. You'd be like, I want to have a relationship with you. I'm not going for cannibalism, right? They left that in, and they even left in that a lot of people that had been following Jesus were like, I'm out. I'm not going for this because that's just weird. And we can, Jesus wasn't advocating cannibalism and certainly didn't want people to actually eat him, but they left that in when they didn't have to. They could have left that. And remember, they're trying to convince people that Jesus is the Messiah. And a statement like that is not helpful. It doesn't meet their stated goal. And then look at number 4. Explain how leaving in demanding sayings of Jesus implies that what the writers wrote is probably true. Yeah.
Because they were trying to
Right. When somebody's trying to get you to do something, you're like, oh, it's easy. Anybody can do. When I was, I don't know if I've told you this before, I was either in 4th or 5th grade because we were living in Korea. And there was a gym right by our house, and I would go all the time, and I'd shoot baskets. That's where I took Taekwondo, and we'd hang out there. And there was this friend, Billy. He was I think he was a year younger than I was. Oh, I was in 5th grade because he was in 4th grade because I remember visiting him in his classroom. And I was jumping from, our fathers were playing like handball or squash or something like that, racquetball, something. And so there was this pommel horse, like for gymnastics. There was gymnastics. So I was getting up on that and jumping up onto the high bar and then swinging on the high bar. And I kept doing it. And I told Billy, go do this. And he was like, no, I'm afraid I don't want to. And I'm like, oh, come on, are you chicken? You know, I'm like taunting him and saying, you can do this, go do it, you know, you chicken. And so he does. And he misses the bar. And he falls flat on his front side. And he gets up and he's like this. And he's crying. And he can't move his arm. And I am such a wonderful person. I ran. The last thing I saw was him at the door of the squash court or whatever, trying to open the door, and he couldn't open the door. He couldn't move his arms because he had 2 broken arms. He broke both of his arms. I know. And I took off. That's why I know I was in 5th grade, because I remember vividly going into Miss Takeda's room, who had been my 4th grade teacher, and there's little Billy Dukes with the 2, casts on sitting there. So I mean, if I I know it was awful. I'm a horrible person, right? So if I'm trying to convince somebody that I am a worthy Bible teacher, I'm not going to lead with that story, am I? And I'm probably never going to tell that story, except for you all know me, and now I probably think I'm a horrible person. And I am, yes.
I basically did the same.
Did you really? Okay, we're good. That's good.
I pushed my brother off the flight and landed on his back. He broke his arm. I ran inside and he
There you go. Yep.
couldn't breathe.
I don't.
Well,
I don't remember what I said to my dad, but I don't know. Billy blamed me.
I was sad because we couldn't call for help.
But
So my dad just looked outside and he was just sitting there crying.
well, I mean, we were young, right? That was like was that last week? Hopefully not. Yeah. Yeah. That's funny. So yeah, if we're trying to win people to someone or something, which is what the disciples were trying to do, why would you include these impossibly high standards that Jesus had given them, right? That take up your cross and follow me. Deny yourself, take up your cross. That's not something people generally want to sign up for. But they left it in there because Jesus said it. Explain how carefully distinguishing Jesus' words from their own implies that what the writers wrote was probably true. Yes.
Learning to have stories of people, important people. They were well-known facts that
Right. Absolutely. That's absolutely right. Yeah. They could have put words in Jesus' mouth, and they were very careful not to do that. I can barely read my handwriting here, but there were a number of disagreements in the early church about, is it okay to eat food that has been offered to idols? Those of you that were in the Hindu temple, they then eat that food, right? Well, that's what would happen is they'd offer food to idols, and then before it went bad, they'd take it to the market and sell it at the market. Is it a sin for a Christian to buy meat that was offered to an idol? Circumcision was an issue, and that's what Galatians is all about. That Paul is saying, look, Jesus plus anything is no gospel at all. Like if you're going to say you need Jesus and to be circumcised to be saved, that's no gospel at all, is what he calls it. And in answering those, and they had a whole big council of Jerusalem in AD 50, I think, right around there, to solve that issue. But they could have put words in Jesus' mouth and said, look, Jesus said this, so it must be true. But words that Jesus didn't say. Jesus didn't talk about what do you do with meat that's been given to idols? What do you do with circumcision? And they didn't. By the way, circumcision is not required. Nothing is required other than we're saved by grace through faith. Yeah, it would have been easy for them to create something to solve that issue, but they didn't. They hammered it out based on what Jesus actually said and what he actually did. And they came to an agreement about all of it. Explain how including events related to the resurrection implies that what the writers wrote is probably true. What does it say about the burial of Jesus? Who buried Jesus?
Member of the Sanhedrin.
Yeah, two actually, Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea. Joseph bought the tomb and Nicodemus helped bury Jesus with him. That's the same group that crucified Christ, right? And they were ostensibly, I think, believers at that point and going against the Sanhedrin. It took a lot of courage, but the thing is, where were the disciples? Why didn't they bury Jesus? They were hiding. John was at the foot of the cross, but it doesn't say anything about him going and asking for Jesus' body and burying him. And so why insert these two men, Joseph and Nicodemus, who were part of the very group that killed Jesus, that condemned him to die? And so it's just inviting, like dissension. It's just inviting people to say, what? That doesn't make sense. The only reason you'd say that is because it's true. The next one is even more important. Who were the first witnesses of the resurrection? Women. And as we've said before, women were not allowed to testify in court because they were considered unreliable witnesses. You don't say that the first witnesses were unreliable witnesses unless they were the first witnesses to the resurrection. It's the worst possible choice they could have made, is to put women at the tomb. And Mary Magdalene, a lot of people think she was a prostitute. She wasn't a prostitute. But Jesus cast out, I think, 7 demons from her. So she's a former demoniac, right? She's a formerly demon-possessed woman. And she's one of the first witnesses. Can we find someone else, please, that doesn't have so much baggage? But they didn't, because it was true. And then the conversion of the priests. What about that Luke Luke tells us? Yeah.
Everyone would have known Luke was a fraud if they weren't prophets.
Yeah, if that didn't happen, the story never would have survived, because people would have been saying, that's not true. That never happened. That's not a miraculous thing, right? The conversion, you can talk your way through the resurrection, but that fact, he was an idiot to put that in there if it wasn't true, because there were people that could have debunked that. And then the explanation of the Jews. Yeah.
Like it said what the Jews thought of it, and then they made it up, and the Jews read it, they just easily know that they made it up. That's not what they thought.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, the first readers knew the explanation. So if it was fabricated, if it was false, they would have known, and they would have challenged that. But they didn't, because they knew it was true. Explain how including more than 30 historically confirmed people in their writings implies that what the writers wrote is probably true. Yeah.
You can't outright lies about real living people and not be exposed.
You can write lies about real people that have been dead a long time and people don't know the truth. But you can't write them within a couple of years of when they happened. And when Paul says, and we're going to get to that in 1 Corinthians 15, when Paul says, you've gotten to, he appeared to Peter and then to the 12 and then to many faithful witnesses, right? He appeared to more than 500 witnesses at one time. And then he says, most of whom are still alive, though some have fallen asleep. Most are alive, but some are dead. What's he intimating there? What's he implying there? A lot of them are. Most of them are. Go ask them, right? If you don't believe me, go ask one of those 500, more than 500 that he appeared to. That those people were witnesses of the resurrection. Number 8, explain how including divergent details implies what the writers wrote is probably true. And we've talked about this quite a bit. That when cops or historians are looking for accurate witnesses, they're looking for the same basic storyline with divergent details. Because everybody notices something different. I just had a conversation with a teacher or a substitute teacher, and she was talking about my room and what she noticed in my room. And what she noticed in my room is probably different than what someone else might notice. Okay, that's it. No homework.
Bye.